It's been about a week since the NFL draft, so we've really had time to sit here and kind of marinate on all these rankings. So we're going to head and go through the updated top 30 wide receiver rankings for 2024 fantasy football. And there's going to be some big news at some point in this video, so make sure we are locked in on this video. We're going through it starting at number 1 and 2 in the same tier as they were last time. Tyreek Hill and CeeDee Lamb. Now, what we're going to do in these rankings is we're going to go through and look at where these guys ended up now compared to where they were before the NFL draft when I did the original top 30 rankings before the draft. So these two guys, they didn't move. And I know that the only thing that really changed here was that Tyreek Hill with the Miami Dolphins, there was the addition of Odell Beckham Jr. That's not going to be enough for me to move the needle on who I prefer. Now, they're in the same tier for a reason because they're both elite players. The numbers on the screen speak for themselves. So if you prefer CeeDee Lamb, go right ahead. Draft CeeDee Lamb at the first wide receiver off the board in your own personal draft. For me personally, the way I rationalize it is Tyreek Hill gets you several massive, week-winning games. That CeeDee Lamb does do, but he doesn't do it quite to the level of Tyreek Hill. So I would go with Tyreek Hill personally. They're very close. That's why they're in the same tier here. And again, number 3 and 4, they're the exact same place as they were last time as well. Ja'Marr Chase and Justin Jefferson. Now again, same tier here for a reason, because if you prefer one or the other, I don't have a problem with you saying, I'd rather have Justin Jefferson. My rationale for this is Ja'Marr Chase has stability at the quarterback position that Justin Jefferson does not right now. Now, J.J. McCarthy, yes, he did get drafted to the Minnesota Vikings. Is there a chance that he sits for a little bit and Sam Darnold starts? I would say there's a slight chance, but considering that he was just outside of the top 10, I would say JJ starts. But again, we don't even know if Minnesota is going to have Justin Jefferson. I would assume so. I'm saying it's likely that Minnesota retains Justin Jefferson. But as of right now, they're both still elite players. As far as I'm concerned, that second tier right behind the first tier, that's why I'm good with both of them. In whatever order you choose to take them, you let me know. Now, number 5 and 6, I've got Amon-Ra St. Brown and Puka Nacua, and they're in the exact same place they were last time. Amon-Ra was 5 last time, Puka was 6, and again, with either of these guys, nothing really changed here. Amon-Ra St. Brown still has the exact same arsenal of weapons because Detroit didn't need to draft anybody, right? They've got a first rounder who has not developed yet, Jameson Williams, and even then, he's never going to be a target hog. This is a guy who was designed and drafted to stretch the field and open up the Detroit offense so that a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's a target hog because he can separate, is going to get another 9 to 10 targets per game in 2024. That's going to happen the exact same way. And then Puka, clear number 1, alpha dog in Los Angeles at this point. So Matt Stafford's the only thing that concerns me here because it's like, this guy's in his mid-30s now. He's had plenty of injuries. How much longer do we have with elite Matt Stafford as far as, being able to fit it through tight windows and all that stuff? Puka Nacua, either way, is going to get a bunch of targets again. So Puka Nacua being the lead target getter is not a question for me. That's why he sits here at number 6 still. A.J. Brown and Garrett Wilson at 7 and 8, exactly the same as last time. So our top 8 guys, they're in the exact same places that they were last time that I did these rankings before the NFL draft. Now, it's very simple. With A.J. Brown, there was a slight change. They drafted 2 wide receivers in day 3. They drafted Johnny Wilson out of Florida State, and they drafted Anaya Smith out of Texas A&M. But neither of those guys hold the draft capital to really challenge these two, Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown, that is. And they're also both locked up. A.J. Brown signed an extension literally minutes before the draft was announced. So A.J. Brown is there for the long term. We know that he's Jalen Hurts' favorite guy to throw to. And Jalen Hurts, if he recovers to being what he was at the earlier portion of last year, A.J. Brown easily has potential to be a top 5 guy. And then Garrett Wilson, I said it in a video ago where I was discussing questions that I want answered when it comes to where I'm taking these guys with draft capital. Garrett Wilson is the number 8 wide receiver on Underdog, and I have drafted him personally several times, but I do want the question answered. Is Aaron Rodgers really committed? Because we've seen him do a lot of stuff this offseason, not really out of the normal, but he has been really involved in things outside of football. So I do want to see some more commitment on his end, but I'm not going to deter my audience from drafting Garrett Wilson. And speaking of drafting, go to Underdog, sign up with code FFN, and deposit $10, where not only will you get a special pick and a first-time deposit match offer up to $250 in bonus cash, you will also get a free copy of my rookie draft guide in 2024. So if you want to know where I ranked 70 plus rookies in this class, including IDP guys, and how they could fit into your particular draft strategy, all you need to do is deposit $10 on Underdog using code FFN. You'll get a free copy of the draft guide that is $15, and you'll be able to see where these rankings are when it comes to these rookies, guys. So let's go ahead and get back into it. At number 9, this is my first big change. I've got Marvin Harrison Jr. at number 9, and he was at number 19 last time. And then Brandon Ayuk at number 10 was number 9 last time. So what Marvin's going to do here is he's essentially going to push a bunch of these guys down one spot because there isn't many changes over the next several picks here. But Marvin Harrison Jr., I'm bought into this point. Now, I know a couple weeks ago I came out with a video, don't draft these overvalued wide receivers, and Marvin Harrison Jr. was on there, and that was before I knew where he was going. And really, we had a good idea before the NFL draft hit that he would be an Arizona Cardinal. But now that he is an Arizona Cardinal, everything is there for me. This guy is an elite prospect. He's my favorite wide receiver prospect that I have seen since Jamar Chase. He's also coming in pro ready. This guy will step in immediately as the wide receiver 1 in Arizona. And he does have a good quarterback. Like, it could have been much worse. He could have went to New York. He could have been Malik Neighbors with Daniel Jones. If that was the case, then he would have dropped. But now we know for certain he has good quarterback play. He's an elite prospect, and he's the clear dominant number 1 wide receiver. Marvin Harrison Jr., I'm in on him right now. And then Brandon Ayuk at 10, we could argue that things should have changed here. Like, with Brandon Ayuk, there's obviously the Ricky Pearsall thing now. Ricky Pearsall was a first-round pick out of the University of Florida. Wide receiver coming into a already crowded wide receiver room with both him and Debo. So there's still a chance, definitely, that him or Debo Samuel gets traded. My rationale for this is wherever Brandon Ayuk goes, I think he'll be a top guy in fantasy. I think he's just that good. I have a lot of trust in Brandon Ayuk, especially if he stays put in San Francisco. Even with Ricky Pearsall, there's just not enough there for me to say that this guy is going to be replaced by a rookie who is coming into a situation where there's clear chemistry with Brandon Ayuk and Brock Purdy. 11 and 12, I've got Nico Collins and Devontae Adams. Now, Nico Collins is exactly where he once was, and Devontae Adams was at number 10 last time. I moved him down here, and I'll discuss that in a minute. With Nico Collins here, the reason he stays here is because, number 1, Houston didn't do anything, right? They didn't make any moves with their wide receivers. It's still the same group. Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell. So Nico Collins, to me, is still my preferred Houston Texan wide receiver in this offense for fantasy football purposes, because I believe he will be the guy who gets most of the big plays, the majority of them. I think he developed great chemistry with CJ Stroud last year. That doesn't really get affected that much by Stephon Diggs, who I'm sure will get plenty of targets himself, and we'll talk about him here in a minute. I don't see much changing here with Nico Collins as far as his big playability goes. Devontae Adams, the reason I moved him down 2 spots is because with the addition of Brock Bowers, right? No doubt it affects Michael Mayer, RIP, to his fantasy value because it is plummeted. But with Gardner Minshew as the quarterback, I don't really see a ton of hope as far as getting multiple guys the ball. So since they spent top 15 draft capital on Brock Bowers, there's going to be an emphasis within the team organization to get this guy the ball. And I don't think that Gardner Minshew has ever showed us, based on any numbers, that he could support 2 great wide receivers or pass catchers in fantasy football. He did enough for number 1, Michael Pittman last year, and he did enough for DJ Chark 1 year in Jacksonville. So with Gardner Minshew, it's just capped. And I do think Devontae will be the main target. That's why he's still here at top 12. But I do think there will be some muddiness within the target pool now that there is an addition of Brock Bowers, a top 15 tight end. Number 13 and 14, I've got Stephon Diggs and Mike Evans. So Stephon Diggs was 12 last time, and Evans was 13 last time. So again, Diggs, I just see a guy in Houston's offense that probably will end up getting like 6 to 7 targets per game. Now, I discussed this earlier in the offseason. Where I could see problems developing here with Houston is if they don't get him the ball enough to his liking. He's known to make noise. With Minnesota, he did it with Kirk Cousins. And at the end with Buffalo, really not at the end, he did it for several years with Buffalo. He made noise if he didn't get the ball enough. So I see potential issues here that could make Stephon Diggs worse in fantasy football. But as of today, in a perfect world, which it is always like that in the offseason, Stephon Diggs stays here at number 13 because we know he's still an effective player. Mike Evans at 14, I think he's one of my favorite values on Underdog so far. And it's not just because like things are the same for the most part with Baker Mayfield. It's also just because they've recommitted to Mike Evans again, and he's going to probably retire there. So this guy, there's going to be a clear emphasis again on getting him the ball. And again, what I like about it is that with Baker Mayfield, he fits Baker's playing style because Baker is not exactly a fitted in tight windows type of guy. That's why Chris Godwin isn't very good with Baker. The reason that Mike Evans is good with Baker is because Mike Evans is good on the deep ball. And Baker does have a very good deep ball. Where I worry about it is without Dave Canales, the offensive coordinator who made it all come together last year. But I just do believe in Mike Evans, the player. And I still do believe that with Baker Mayfield's playing style, it'll end up meshing for good fantasy production. 15 and 16. I've got Chris Olave and Michael Pittman Jr. Again, they were all moved down a spot because of Marvin Harrison Jr. Olave was 14 last time, and Pittman was 15 last time. So nothing really changes here. Olave's situation, exactly the same. In New Orleans, there was really nothing that was major done. They got some undrafted guys at the wide receiver position. They've got A.T. Perry, second-year guy. They've got Rashid Shaheed. Chris Olave is the number one target for Derek Carr. I think his ceiling is capped because of Derek Carr and because I just don't think he works very well with Derek Carr. So I think his ceiling is capped around 13, 14, 15 range. But I do think he's about as safe as it gets for getting 12 to 13 fantasy points per game in a half PPR format. And then with Michael Pittman Jr., I just see a guy that has a much higher ceiling than this. But again, I think very stable baseline of about 12 fantasy points per game. Number one wide receiver by far. Adonai Mitchell into the fold doesn't affect me because, again, think back to what we were talking about, Jameson Williams with Detroit. Adonai Mitchell is almost a clone of Jameson Williams, except he wasn't even that good in college. But as far as his skill set goes, it's basically the exact same thing. So Indianapolis is using him as a field stretcher, which means that he's not going to be a target guy. The target guy is Michael Pittman Jr. So theoretically, if everything works out with Adonai Mitchell, it could actually see a big bump up in Michael Pittman Jr.'s production of fantasy football. What we need to rely on, if we're really trusting Michael Pittman, is that Anthony Richardson develops into a better pocket passer as far as making quick and decisive decisions and getting the ball placed accurately. If all that comes, I could see Michael Pittman easily being a top 10 wide receiver in fantasy. 17 and 18, I've got Drake London and DJ Moore. Now again, one spot down, London was 16, DJ Moore was 17 last time. With Drake London, obviously there's a massive change as far as like what Atlanta did with their draft capital. I have the same concerns with London that I did several weeks ago. London's concerns are lying with who the quarterback is going to be. Now that they used a top 10 selection with a quarterback, there's no guarantee that Kirk Cousins starts. Mark my words. Yes, he was guaranteed $100 million. I understand that. Most of the time, that's surefire starter. There have only been 2 quarterbacks in the last 10 drafts that were selected in the top 10 of their NFL draft that did not start year one. Patrick Mahomes and Trey Lance. Kirk Cousins is in his mid-30s coming off an Achilles tear, and he's not going to get training camp reps. So there's a chance that Michael Penix Jr. comes in and he looks good in training camp and the players are like, we want this guy. We want him to play for us. If that happens, I think Drake London will shoot up my list. But if we're relying on Kirk Cousins, that's why he's going to be down this low. And then DJ Moore at 18, obviously the situation changes. Rome Odunze, first-round draft pick, top 10 guy out of Washington, goes to that wide receiver room. They have 3 alphas in Chicago now with a rookie quarterback. So one of these guys is going to be lower on the totem pole, and I think it's probably going to be Keenan Allen. The reality with DJ Moore is he's still young. He's in the prime of his career. He broke out last year with Chicago. There's just no way that he's not going to see another 120 targets in this offense, and I think they're probably going to be more efficient just because of the fact that there's 3 elite guys there now, as opposed to there being one last year and the other guy being Cole Kmet. 19 and 20, Jordan Addison and Devonta Smith. Jordan Addison was number 20 last time, and Devonta rose at number 26 last time. First, I want to say this about Jordan Addison. Without a doubt, my favorite wide receiver value in underdog drafts, 100%. He's the wide receiver 40 on underdog. He was a top 25 wide receiver last year. Top 30 guy. This was like, we're counting on him to move 10 steps back at the very least in fantasy football. There's no way that's going to happen. Coming into his second year, he's not going to regress because this guy has the big play ability. He has equity within that wide receiver room and within that locker room. Minnesota likes him. He was a first-round pick. So this notion that Jordan Addison is going to be a worse player, I think it's actually subconscious. I don't think people actually believe that, but nobody's really questioning his draft price like I am. This is a prime opportunity to get a big play threat who will definitely finish as a top 20 wide receiver at the very least. Go draft him on underdog today. If there's a value to be taken advantage of, it's Jordan Addison right now. So use code FFN, go draft him. And then Devonta Smith, he rose up for me because when I look at Philadelphia's, situation on offense, right? And like we discussed with AJ Brown, there's a change that they got 2 later round wide receivers. With Philadelphia, it doesn't really matter. Like, Philadelphia and Devonta Smith will go through the period of time like he does with every year with AJ Brown, where he'll go get 10 targets a game and he'll have like 20 fantasy points per game for like 4-week stretch. And then he'll go through another period of time where he'll be really dry with like 3 or 4 targets per game for like 2 months. And he gets like 7 fantasy points per game. So that always evens it out with Devonta Smith. Like, there's good moments and bad moments with AJ Brown there. But again, he's still clearly the number 2 in this offense as far as pass catchers go. Dallas Goedert doesn't scare me. So Devonta Smith, after kind of looking at it again, I was like, there's just no way he should be lower than top 25 because he definitely will provide you the big games in order to win weeks. And that is a big needle mover for me. 21, Jalen Waddle, and 22, Deebo Samuel. Jalen Waddle was 25 last time, and Deebo was 21. So again, it's similar with Jalen Waddle as it was with Devonta Smith. It's going to be a needle mover to me that Jalen Waddle will hit big plays. His problem last year was that his touchdowns regressed from 2022, but I actually see that number coming back up. Like you could see on the screen, the touchdowns just really weren't there for him that much last year. I think they go back up. And again, I think it actually will help that Odell Beckham Jr. will be there. They'll probably use him, 60% of the time. And Odell will come, scare some defenses enough deep to open it up for Jalen Waddle. So I think Jalen Waddle actually has a decent shot of providing more over the middle of the field production this year instead of just kind of being relegated to a big play role. And I guarantee you that's the exact thing that Miami was looking at when they came into the offseason and said Jalen Waddle just didn't hit as many big plays as much because there wasn't a third guy there effectively, helping out Jalen Waddle. So Odell is there for that reason, I think, which is why it doesn't really bother me when it comes to ranking these Miami wide receivers. Deebo Samuel at 22. I said this on a video just last week. I don't like Deebo's price. He's the wide receiver. He's a top 16 wide receiver on underdog right now. And with Ricky Pearsall, that's the guy that I see being more effective than Brandon Ayuk. That's assuming they're all there, right? If Brandon Ayuk gets traded tomorrow, there's obviously going to be a shuffle in these rankings again. If Deebo Samuel gets traded tomorrow, he'll be shuffled around probably. Deebo Samuel in his upper 20s, not exactly the cleanest bill of health, and a guy who was used so infrequently as a runner, it's really hard to rank Deebo Samuel at any time of the year, but especially when you add in a first-round draft capital to the room again, there definitely is going to be some shakeup here if all three of those guys are there come September. Malik Neighbors at 23 and Amari Cooper at 24. So Amari was number 23 last time. He stays. And Malik Neighbors was 27 last time. So we could say to ourselves, like, how does Malik Neighbors move up now that he's a New York Giant? Like, that doesn't make any sense. He's playing with a bottom 10 quarterback as far as starters go in the league. How does that happen? Well, there's good and bad parts to this. Like, obviously, him being with Daniel Jones sucks as far as having a good quarterback who will last a long time. The good thing, though, is that there's no target competition. So he immediately lines up to get 120 plus targets. That's just the way it will be because Malik Neighbors is a great wide receiver prospect who is pro ready. So the target share is going to be in Malik Neighbors' favor right out of the gate. Now, the other bad part of it is, like, what if it's a Drake London situation like it was years ago with Atlanta where the quarterback just isn't good enough? Well, that's possible for sure. But I'm going to go based on the fact that this guy is a great prospect, better than Drake London was. And also I'm going to go on the fact that he's going to be the sole guy there. The sole guy. So he's going to see a lot of target opportunities. And then Amari Cooper, I think people are just kind of forgetting about him. Dude has not been cut. Dude has not been traded. Maybe he'll be a post-June 1st cut in which there will be a reevaluation of where he will be. But Amari Cooper right now on Cleveland, he's the wide receiver one. It's not Jerry Jeudy. It's not Cedric Tillman. There's nobody there who's going to challenge Amari Cooper for wide receiver one duties. He has chemistry with Deshaun Watson, who they want to work, by the way. They're going to do everything they can to make him work this year. So Amari Cooper is absolutely staying put here at number 24 for me. Calvin Ridley and George Pickens at 25 and 26. Now, they both rose up for me. Calvin was 28 last time. Pickens was 29 last time. And for me, Ridley just gets more and more interesting, which is so weird because last year I didn't want anything to do with him. This year I do. He's being drafted as like a bottom-end wide receiver 3, high-end wide receiver 4 in fantasy football. That price makes no sense. He's a $90 million wide receiver in an offense that I think low-key could be explosive this year. Will Levis has a good arm. He's a good athlete. They're trying to do everything they can to make him work by not only signing Ridley, but they got guys like Pollard. They drafted offensive line in the top 10 of the draft. So there's a lot being done right now to make Will Levis successful. And I think Calvin Ridley will be the primary beneficiary of it if it ends up hitting. So yeah, I will take Calvin Ridley as a top 25 guy this year because I do believe in the system they're putting around Will Levis in Tennessee. And then Pickens here, I just struggle with the quarterbacks. But there's no doubt he's the wide receiver one. I would not be surprised to see Pickens get 8 to 9 to 10 targets per game this year. And if that happens, that's ridiculous, great wide receiver one volume. The problem is the quarterbacks here. Pickens is a downfield threat. Russell Wilson throws very short. He does not throw down the field much, so that's going to cause some friction. Whereas where he's going to be most of the time he's running routes, he's probably better off with Justin Fields, but I don't think they're going to start Justin Fields day one. So that's going to leave Pickens up in the air for me back here at the bottom of the top 30 rankings. Zay Flowers at 27 and Jaden Reed at 28. Zay Flowers was not on the top 30 last time, and Jaden Reed was number 30. So both of these guys are very similar in the sense of like, they're both kind of like getting a lot of shorter targets. They really didn't have too much average depth of target. Jaden Reed actually ran more big plays than Zay Flowers did because Jaden Reed's got a more downfield quarterback with Jordan Love, whereas Lamar Jackson, a lot of quick strikes. That's how their offense is built. So with Zay Flowers, number one clearly in Baltimore. Guy is going to come in and develop year one, year two. No more Odell Beckham there taking up targets. So Zay Flowers, the chances he sees like 10 targets per game, not out of the question at all. Zay Flowers, the ultimate problem is that wide receivers in Baltimore just don't have much fantasy upside, but still deserving to be in the top 30. And then Jaden Reed, like I said, is going to continue to see a bunch of miscellaneous type of things. He's kind of a Deebo Samuel hybrid type of guy. The only thing I worry about is with Christian Watson, if he's fully healthy, that was typically when you saw less production from Jaden Reed in 2023. So do they iron that out in the offseason? It's still unknown, but based on the production he gave them last year, I can't just see them, relegating him to part-time slot duties. Jaden Reed's a top 30 guy. Rounding it out, T. Higgins at 29 and Xavier Worthy at 30. These guys, neither of them were ranked last time. T. Higgins, my thing is that it's a contract year for him, basically. So he's going to want to do everything he can. With a healthy Joe Burrow and with a healthy T. Higgins, I definitely could see him doing top 25, top 20 production again. Like T. Higgins, when he's fully healthy, can give you serious big boom potential. 30-point games, 35-point games, 40-point games. That's in the car for T. Higgins. Now, it's not going to be consistent. It'll be very much like Devonta Smith in Philly, but the potential is definitely there. So I'm going to bank on them all being healthy this year, and I'm going to bank on him being a good player in fantasy because it's a contract year. And then at 30, Xavier Worthy is the only Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver in here. There's two reasons he's on this list. Number one, he was a first-round pick, and he's going to be used in a Tyreek Hill type of way where they're going to go deep with this guy. So there's going to be a lot of games, I think, that Xavier Worthy probably is invisible, but there's also going to be several games in the year where I could see him getting 2 touchdowns and like 120 yards on like 3 catches. That's how they're going to use Xavier Worthy. Number 2, the reason he's on here is because Rashee Rice is looking like he's facing possibly half a season suspension. So without Rashee Rice there being the target guy, there's a chance that we see some more Xavier Worthy getting like 6 to 7 targets per game. So in Kansas City's offense, I can't picture not having a wide receiver from that offense inside of the top 30. And that's why Xavier Worthy is here at number 30. Now make sure to go down there and drop a like on this video and subscribe to the channel to show your support. And let me know what you think of the rankings in the comments below.